I still remember the exact shade of pink they painted my walls the day after they kicked me out. Ballet slipper pink, Jessica's favorite. The same color that covered my childhood memories as they transformed my bedroom into her dance studio. "You're 18 now, Emma," Dad had said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Jessica needs the space for her training. She's going to be a star." Mom was already packing my things into garbage bags. Not boxes, bags. Like everything I owned was just trash to be cleared out. My academic trophies, my honor roll certificates, my computer science textbooks, all unceremoniously shoved aside to make room for my 16-year-old sister's ballet dreams. But where am I supposed to go? I remember asking, watching them dismantle my life. "I just started my first semester at college." "The garage has a couch," Mom replied, yanking down my coding competition medals from the wall. "Or find an apartment. You're an adult now." An adult. Right. An adult who was working part-time at a coffee shop while taking a full course load in computer science. An adult whose college fund had mysteriously disappeared into Jessica's competition fees and special training programs. That night, I slept in the garage, surrounded by old cardboard boxes and the persistent smell of motor oil. Through the thin walls, I could hear Jessica's music as she practiced her routines in my former room. Mom's voice drifted down, full of praise and encouragement, sounds I hadn't heard directed at me in years. The next morning, I called the only person who'd ever believed in me, my grandmother. "Move in with me," she said without hesitation. "Your grandfather's old office is empty and I could use the company." Grandma Grace had always been different. While my parents threw money at Jessica's every whim, Grandma watched me. She saw how I would fix the neighbors' computers for extra cash. How I spent hours learning to code, building websites, dreaming of something bigger. "You remind me of your grandfather," she told me one night after I'd moved in. We were sitting in his old office, now my bedroom, surrounded by his engineering books. He built something from nothing too. Started with one building, ended up with a real estate empire. She pulled out an old leather portfolio. "He left this to me, but I think you need it more." Inside was the deed to a small apartment building in the up-and-coming part of the city. Not prime real estate, but solid. Profitable. A foundation. "It's yours now," she said, pressing the portfolio into my hands. "Do something with it." That was 10 years ago. 10 years of working every spare moment. 10 years of learning about property management, real estate development, and investment strategies. 10 years of turning one building into 5, then 10, then a whole portfolio of prime properties across the city. And now here I was, watching through the one-way glass of my newest luxury building's leasing office as my parents filled out a rental application. They hadn't changed much. Dad still had that air of entitled confidence, even though his law practice had been struggling lately. Mom still wore that look of barely concealed anxiety behind her expensive makeup. They were trying to downsize, I knew, after Jessica's dance career had fizzled out despite the thousands they'd poured into it. "Miss Chin," my property manager's voice crackled through the intercom. "The Walkers are asking about the penthouse suite. Should I?" "Let them finish the application," I replied, straightening my designer suit. "I'll handle this personally." Through the glass, I watched Mom's eyes widen as she read the rental requirements. The income specifications alone would stretch their budget to the breaking point, but they were desperate to keep up appearances. This building, the Grace, named after my grandmother, was the most prestigious address in the city. 3 months deposit up front, Dad muttered, flipping through the paperwork. Highway robbery. If only he knew who was robbing him. I checked my reflection in the mirror, making sure my professional mask was firmly in place. 10 years ago, I'd been the unwanted daughter they'd exiled to the garage. Now I was about to become their potential landlord. "Send them into my office," I told my manager. "It's time for their interview." The look on their faces would be priceless. But more than revenge, this was about something else. This was about the girl in the garage, the one they'd thrown away like yesterday's trash, finally showing them exactly what she'd become. I settled behind my desk, fingers brushing against Grandpa's old portfolio, my lucky charm. From somewhere in the building, classical music drifted through the walls. Ballet music. I smiled at the irony. "Send them in." The door opened with the soft whisper of expensive hinges. My office, like everything else in the Grace, was designed to impress floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern art pieces carefully selected to suggest both wealth and taste, and my grandfather's restored mahogany desk commanding the center of the room. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker," my assistant announced, ushering them in. "Here for the penthouse interview." Mom entered first, her Botoxed smile frozen in place. She'd gotten her hair done recently, probably at that overpriced salon she couldn't really afford anymore. Dad followed, his confident stride faltering slightly as he took in the office. I could practically see him calculating the square footage, the cost per square foot, adding up his own diminishing worth in his head. Neither of them recognized me at first. Why would they? The Emma they'd known wore coffee-stained uniforms and second-hand clothes. This Emma wore Chanel and had her own driver. "Please have a seat," I gestured to the chairs in front of my desk, enjoying the way they immediately complied. Amazing how the dynamics of power could shift in a decade. "We're very interested in the penthouse suite," Mom began, her practiced social voice in full effect. "Money is no object, of course." I glanced down at their application, taking my time. "I see you're currently residing in the Oakwood district. That's quite a change, moving from a 5-bedroom house to a penthouse apartment." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We're downsizing. Empty nesters now." "Empty nesters," I repeated softly. "Both your daughters moved out then?" "Our youngest had a promising dance career," Mom jumped in predictably. "She trained with the best companies in Europe. Our older daughter—" She paused, that familiar dismissive tone creeping in. "She moved out quite some time ago." "Did she?" I looked up, finally meeting their eyes. "To the garage, as I recall." The silence that followed was exquisite. I watched as confusion gave way to recognition, then shock, then something close to horror. "Emma." Mom's voice had lost its polished edge. "Hello, Mother." I leaned back in my chair, letting them process the moment. "Father. It's been 8 years since the last awkward family Christmas." Dad's lawyer instincts kicked in first. You own this building?" "This building?" I laughed softly. "I own the whole block. The Grace is just one of 30 properties in my portfolio. But you'd know that if you'd bothered to keep track of what happened to your disappointing daughter after you threw her out." "We didn't throw you out," Mom protested weakly. "We just needed the space for Jessica's training." "Yes, I remember. How did that work out?" "Last I heard, she was teaching beginner ballet at the community center." The barb hit home. Mom flinched and Dad's face reddened. "Now," I continued, pulling out their application, "let's discuss your rental application. Your income doesn't quite meet our requirements. Your credit score is concerning. And your references." I paused, letting the tension build. "Well, let's just say they weren't exactly glowing." "Listen, Emma," Dad started, his lawyer voice emerging, the one he used when negotiating plea deals. "About what happened, Save it." I held up my hand. "This isn't about what happened 10 years ago. This is a business meeting. You want to rent the penthouse suite in my building. I'm telling you that you don't qualify." "But surely you could make an exception," Mom pleaded. "We're family." The word hung in the air like smoke, acrid and choking. "Family," I repeated, opening my desk drawer. "Interesting you should mention that." I pulled out a familiar garbage bag, one I'd kept all these years. "Remember this? My entire childhood stuffed into trash bags because boxes were too much trouble." Mom had the grace to look ashamed. "I kept this as a reminder," I continued. "Not of what you did to me, but of what I promised myself I'd never become. I built this company from nothing, sleeping on Grandma Grace's floor, working 3 jobs while finishing my degree. And now you want me to break my own rules because we share DNA. Please." Dad's voice had lost its authority. "We need this apartment. Our house. We can't afford it anymore. The market's changed, my practice isn't what it used to be. The garage has a couch," I quoted their words back to them. "Or find an apartment. You're adults now." The color drained from their faces as their own words came back to haunt them. But then I did something that surprised even me. I pulled out another set of papers. "There is one option," I said slowly. "We have a smaller unit available. 2 bedrooms, 4th floor. The rent is within your budget, and the credit requirements are less stringent." They stared at the papers, pride warring with desperation. "It's a lovely unit," I continued. "In fact, it's right next to the building's storage area. You might find the sound of machinery, familiar. Dad's head snapped up as he caught my meaning. The unit was next to the garage. They took the fourth-floor apartment. Pride, as it turned out, was more flexible when faced with financial reality. I watched through my office window as they loaded their remaining possessions, significantly fewer than they'd had in their heyday, into the service elevator. Jessica showed up 3 days later, bursting into my office despite my assistant's protests. "How dare you put them next to the garage?" she demanded, still carrying herself with that dancer's posture, though her leotard days were long behind her. "They're our parents." I looked up from my laptop, taking in my sister's appearance. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by department store business casual. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, no more elaborate stage-ready styles. "Hello, Jessica." "Still practicing in my old room?" She flinched. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed, closing my laptop. "It wasn't fair. Just like it wasn't fair when they drained my college fund for your career. Or when they kicked me out without a second thought. Life's funny that way." "I didn't ask them to do those things," she protested, but her voice was weaker now. "Didn't you?" I stood up, walking to the window. "Every time you needed new shoes, new costumes, new private lessons, did you ever once think about where that money was coming from? Did you ever wonder why I was working 3 jobs while trying to finish school?" She joined me at the window, and for a moment we both watched the city bustle below. "I was 16, she said finally. I thought that's just how things were. That you were the independent one, the strong one. I never realized that they were sacrificing one daughter for the other." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "And now look at us. You're this incredible success story, and I'm teaching baby ballet to toddlers." "There's nothing wrong with teaching," I said, surprising myself with the gentleness in my voice. "At least you're doing something you love." "Am I?" She laughed bitterly. "Or am I doing the only thing I know how to do? They never let me explore anything else. It was always ballet, ballet, ballet." We stood in silence for a moment, 2 sisters shaped by the same parents in vastly different ways. "I have a proposition for you," I said finally. "The Grace runs several community programs. One of them is a performing arts school for underprivileged kids. We need someone to run it." Jessica's eyes widened. "You'd trust me with that?" "It's not a handout," I clarified quickly. "You'd start as an instructor, work your way up. Learn business management, program development. Build something of your own." "Why?" she asked. "Why help me after everything?" I turned to face her fully. "Because unlike our parents, I don't believe in sacrificing one person for another. And because maybe it's time we both got the chance to be who we really are, not who they wanted us to be." The next few months brought changes none of us could have predicted. Mom and Dad adjusted to apartment living, though I often caught Mom staring wistfully at the penthouse windows above. Dad started taking on smaller cases, finding a new purpose in helping people who really needed legal aid rather than chasing wealthy clients. Jessica threw herself into the community arts program, discovering she had a talent not just for teaching dance, but for nurturing creativity in children who'd never had the chance to express themselves. She moved into a modest apartment in one of my other buildings, paying full rent at her insistence. Grandma Grace, who'd watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction, finally agreed to move into the penthouse suite I'd been offering her for years. "Your grandfather would be proud," she told me over dinner one evening. "Not just of the empire you've built, but of how you've handled everything." "Even putting Mom and Dad next to the garage?" I asked, smiling. She laughed. "Especially that. Sometimes people need a taste of their own medicine to understand its bitterness." A year after they moved in, I received a letter from my parents. Inside was a formal apology, handwritten on proper stationery, acknowledging everything they'd done wrong. Along with it was a check, an attempt to repay my stolen college fund with interest. I framed the letter but returned the check with a note. "Invest it in Jessica's arts program instead. Some things are worth more than money." The following Christmas, for the first time in a decade, we all gathered in Grandma's penthouse. The conversation was stilted at first, years of hurt and regret hanging in the air like tinsel. But as the evening wore on, something shifted. Dad asked about my latest development project, showing genuine interest. Mom helped Jessica lay out her plans for expanding the arts program. There were moments of awkwardness, old habits threatening to resurface, but we caught ourselves, corrected course. Standing on the penthouse balcony later that night watching the city lights twinkle below, I thought about the girl in the garage. She'd been hurt, angry, determined to prove everyone wrong. And she had. But somewhere along the way, proving them wrong had become less important than proving herself right. Emma. Jessica joined me on the balcony. Thank you. Not just for the program but for showing me there's more than one way to dance. I smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought us here. From a garage to a penthouse, from broken to healing, from revenge to redemption. You know, I said, I think we're all learning new steps. 2 years later, I stood at the podium during the grand opening of the Walker Arts Center, our family's newest venture. The building, once a rundown warehouse, had been transformed into a state-of-the-art facility combining dance studios, technology labs, and creative spaces. Jessica ran the performing arts division while I managed the STEM programs. Mom and Dad sat in the front row, their expressions a mix of pride and regret. They'd finally learned to see both their daughters clearly, not as competitions against each other, but as complementary forces. Sometimes, I told the audience, the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's building something so magnificent that the past becomes just a foundation for something greater. This center represents not just second chances, but the power of family to rebuild, reimagine, and grow together. Later that evening, as we all gathered in what used to be my garage bedroom, now converted into a memorial wall showcasing both Jessica's dance achievements and my business milestones, Grandma Grace raised her glass. To the garage, she said with a knowing smile, where great things begin.